As investors and developers, we see the world differently. This podcast uncovers the untold truths of what it really takes to become a multi-million dollar residential developer. I'm Nathan Battershall. Let's get to work. Well, welcome to the Residential Developer Podcast. My name's Nathan Battershall and I'm your host. And we're very lucky to have Maria Laverde back with us, our lead designer at Duplex Building Design. Welcome to the podcast again, Maria.
Good morning, Nathan. How are you?
Good. It's good to have you back in.
Yes.
Back for another session. So today I thought we could talk about terraces under the low-rise code. We've obviously done quite a few terraces, so I think it's a good space to chat about. I think it's a great avenue, it's a good area for developers to invest in. Just with we're hearing of interest rates going up again soon. Holding costs are obviously expensive. It's a fast-track approval process, so I think it's a great space to be in.
Yes.
So, look, let's just kick off by, do you want to just tell us a little bit about terraces under the low-rise code? Obviously, the word terrace, sometimes when I think of the word terrace, I think of an old-style terrace house in Paddington, but it's far from that, isn't it? Do you want to just debunk that myth, I guess, a little bit about what terraces are and just talk a little bit about terraces under the low-rise CDC code?
Yes. Definitely there is an old myth of terraces looking old and renovated, pardon me, and not having parking and all of these things that are definitely not what happens in the low-rise diversity code. So there are many ways of going around the style. Definitely they can look as modern. We have come up with different design solutions to make them look like townhouses. We call them more like townhouses or triplexes or quadplexes, things like in a different way for people not to take away the concept of the Victorian type of terrace.
Yep.
But sometimes we have even detached them in couples in the first floor. So from the street, they more look like a duplex.
Yeah. So essentially, it's just like a typical multi-dwelling development.
It is, yes.
Someone wanting to do more than two, so three or more, really.
It is important to know that the terraces, they must all face the street.
Yeah.
So it is a multi-dwelling development that has more than two dwellings on the approval, but that each of the dwellings is facing the street.
Yeah. So
that is the definition
so
of the
essentially,
terrace.
really, if you want to get a larger yield or more dwellings, you essentially need a wider block. Like a very deep block for it essentially doesn't really benefit much.
No. When the blocks are deep, we will need to start exploring different type of development, more like the townhouse development through the A. But for terraces, what we need is wide frontages, which it means that allows us to feed 3 or 4 or 5, 10, as many as we want.
Yeah, excellent. So I guess it's probably good to talk about, there's obviously challenges, there's benefits, there's challenges in these type of developments, terraces under the CDC. Do you want to run us through some challenges you've found, or essentially some challenges you've encountered or come across, and how have you been able to overcome some of those challenges?
Yes. I think the biggest challenges is the driveway crossings, because it means that we have to have so many in a certain length while complying with minimum distances from the corner, while fitting the driveway crossings within the actual site constraints, such as power pole or stormwater drainage, or all of these things. So the driveways are a challenge.
Yeah.
And what we have been doing in Duplex for quite a long time is that once we know we are going to propose some terraces, the first thing we do is approval for the Section 138, which is the council approval for the driveway crossings. So we know even before we do a layout that those driveways are approved.
Yeah.
Because it's the only approval that we need from council.
So essentially your driveway crossovers determine the outcome of the terrace development.
Funny enough, yes. Well, there is a minimum width for each of the terraces, and most of the times we try to fit as many as possible. So it means that you already know roughly how wide they will be and where your garages are going to go. So that is where we provide or propose the driveway crossings before we even go into the layout.
Yeah.
So that is one of the challenges. Another challenge is make sure we are not on a classified road. So they are roads that are busy, and when they get to a certain level of busy roads, they are called classified roads. So if the block is facing a classified road, then we require at least 9 meters front setback.
Yeah.
And because usually these blocks are wide but not very deep, that is a killer.
Yeah. That kills your rear setback, doesn't it?
Yeah, that is a killer. And obviously other big constraints, trees, always in any development. Other, probably the hardest for me to design is that it will be great to fit more than 4 or 5 terraces in a block. But to fit those, we need more than 900 square meters blocks most of the times. And when we hit that value of more than 900, the required setbacks under the low-rise housing diversity code increases for the ground floor at the rear and the first floor at the rear.
Yep.
So
we're talking, for people listening, so for 900 square metre or less, our rear setback, what are we talking? 3 metres ground floor?
Yeah, and the first floor 8.
8.
Yes.
So then after the 900?
After the 900, the first floor is 12.
Yeah.
And the ground floor is 5.
Yeah. So essentially that's where you need the deeper block.
Yeah.
For
allowing
more terraces.
That. Yes.
Yep.
Or a beautiful thing, if the block has a lane, we are talking now.
Yeah.
Because if you have a lane, then you can have the parking facing the lane.
Yep.
That parking can be 0 setback, and we can have studios above the parking.
Yeah.
So it's a
pretty massive.
Yeah, it's a huge thing.
And with the laneway and the terrace can be a little bit narrower, can it?
Yeah, 5 meters wide. Yeah.
Instead of 6.
Exactly. Instead of the 6 meters but those 6 meters is when the garage is facing the street.
Yep.
So
we'll bring back the laneways, hey?
Yeah, beautiful.
Bring back the laneways. Excellent. And in terms of, obviously you've designed a few terraces now, like what are some key components that you've found that are suitable for a good terrace type development? Like are there some things that you've found some hacks or some tricks that you've learnt along the way when designing terraces that you've found have been really helpful and beneficial? Obviously, we got to walk through that beautiful one on Hillcrest in Wollongong that's now finished, and we got to see that one you played a big role in. What are some hacks that you've developed when it comes to designing terraces?
I think that one of the biggest challenges that needs a solution that is a hack is the solar access, the amount of light that we can bring into the dwelling, since does have a common wall on each of the external side walls. So I think that we have come up with solutions on providing in certain places in the ground floor, most likely the living area, a recess, so we can now have side windows. The fact that the first floor is set back from the ground floor, it also allows us to propose some skylights, usually over living areas, providing also more light. And the same hack that I mentioned before, that is that the terraces can be attached in the ground floor, but they can be detached in the first floor. Therefore, there is more room for more bedrooms going backwards, but also light access from every point. So you just need the fire separation, meaning 900 minimum from the boundary to the first floor wall, and then we will be able to put windows on the side walls.
Which essentially, even walking through that Hillcrest property, it just felt like a duplex, didn't it?
It does, yeah.
Like it doesn't feel like a row of terraces because of the amount of extra natural light due to the fact that only a very small portion of the development was attached.
Yeah, well, the fact that you can play with the ceiling heights as well, the building height, allowing us to have a lot of light in, and the fact that they are detached, that all component means that we are definitely in a different era of terraces.
Yeah.
So that is why sometimes we don't like to call them terraces, because we think that they are dark, narrow, and not well distributed. But we have demonstrated that is not the case, that we have had very well distributed terraces that has everything that a house needs to have.
Yeah. That's
So
exactly what I was about to say. Like they feel like a house.
they do.
They feel as big as a house.
Yeah, they do. And they are, we have done, for example, the one in Hillcrest, the garages were much wider.
Yeah.
There was a lot of floor to ceiling light windows. So definitely it is. Also, it allows for a lot of architecture in the facade.
Yeah.
So we have had different terraces where some of them have been coastal,
Yes.
like coastal modern, like the one in the Hillcrest. But we have other ones coming and getting built at the moment where they are a totally different architectural style. We have one coming out in Terrace, which is totally black with pentagonal frames. So it doesn't mean that we need to box ourselves on how they will be looking, which it also will bring a different perspective of how they actually work.
Yeah. And I guess that leads me to something I think you started to tap into there is obviously you can be quite constrained if we've got 6 meters to work with. You've got a certain amount of articulation. Designing a house, for example, you've got a lot of room to move things around and pop things out. But obviously the terraces, you don't have as much scope. But do you find it actually helps you really have to put your creative hat on and thinking cap on how to articulate those facades to make them pop and pushes you out of your square? Whereas obviously a house at times you can really, in a way, you get a bit spoiled for being able to really make something pop. But with terraces, there's, you've only got a small width. Do you enjoy that challenge of being able to really have that tight constraint, but the ability to maybe try things and when it comes to materials and articulations and, styles and that sort of thing?
Well, there is, for the listeners that are not familiar with the whole requirements, there is an allowance of articulation, meaning that we can go up to 1.5 meters in front of the building line for a maximum of 25% of the area of the width of that terrace. So we need to take advantage of that. And sometimes it's not that much. It's probably only 5 square meters or 3 square meters. And that is when we need to take advantage and push the architectural side of it to be able to develop something that makes the facade be unique and attractive.
Yeah.
Because everything comes through the eyes.
Yes.
So we want a whole package to work well. We want a good layout. We want a lot of lighting, but we also want pretty houses.
Yeah.
We also want houses where people wants to live in. So I love the challenge. I love the challenge of when somebody tells you, I want the terraces to look Hamptons, but then another client tells you, I want to look French provincial. Oh, totally different things. And trying to understand what are the key components of that architectural era or that architectural style and be able to introduce them into the constraints that are into the low-rise housing diversity code is a challenge that personally I love.
Yep, brilliant. And look, obviously there's a lot of people out there and a lot of our listeners are probably just with the delays that can happen with the DA, especially for townhouse developments, who are looking to investigate doing a triplex or 4 on like a corner block or looking for a way to do more than just a duplex. Obviously, a lot of investors and developers might start out doing smaller projects, a dual occupancy or a duplex, but want to eventually branch out to sort of doing 3s and 4s and maybe even some branching out further. Like what's some of your advice, or what's some advice from a designer's point of view and someone who's been involved in quite a number of these terrace projects under the low-rise code? Like, have you got some thoughts that you can share with, say, like an investor who or a developer who wants to like move into that space? Have you got some advice around terraces, like what sort of blocks to look for? You know, what type of blocks are you finding are most suitable for these type of sort of 3s and 4s and maybe even more?
Yeah, well, important to find out the setbacks of the neighbors if they are in R2. Ideally, best blocks are 3 because the neighbors then they don't take into account in the front setback.
Yeah.
Corner blocks are amazing because that means that we can have one of the terrace facing the other street. The setbacks are reduced. Lanes, beautiful for terraces. And 21 meters wide is the minimum required width for a block for fitting 3. Because for terraces, the minimum size setback is 1,500, and the minimum width of each of the terraces is 6 meters. So if we want to fit 3, we need a 21 meters. So from 21 up, we would be able to have them. There is also another thing that is good, that it means that we can propose also double garages for terraces.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that.
Exactly. So it means that we have a minimum width of a terrace.
Yes.
But that is the minimum. There is no maximum.
Yeah.
Okay, so if the client and the investor say, well, I'm in an area where I want double garages, we can make those wider and provide double garages. So there is a lot of advices that I can give, but also do your feasibilities, do your homework, find out the constraints on the site. In general, in all developments, the same, and be open to the idea of making them, try them, put your foot forward to develop terraces. They are actually a really good way of making multi-dwelling in a really fast track way.
Yeah, that's it. We're talking like 2, 3, 4 weeks approval time.
Well, from the time that you submit to the private certifier,
Yeah.
most of the times 3-4 weeks, and you get them approved. And how long it takes with the designer, they don't have to be the same. Sometimes they are slightly different inside. They don't have to look exactly the same in the facade. They no mirror images. So if you don't want them to be one identical to the other, we can play with the design. But then the time that the consultants take, and then you get an approval. So we're talking a difference between 4 months, 5 months between A to Z, while in council, most likely.
How long's a piece of string? 6 months,
probably
12
6,
months?
8, 12 months to get a DA. And then we need to do construction
CC.
certificate. So it's a big difference.
It's definitely, and in terms of subdivision, like you've got both options too often, don't you?
Yes.
Strata,
Yes.
Torrens.
It goes more up to what is the minimum lot size of each of the blocks after they get built.
Yes.
So I'm pretty sure that if we have 180, we can have them subdivided as a strata.
Yep.
But then it is an easier strata because that means that the only part that is commonly shared is the party wall.
Yeah.
So they will have an strata body, but in general, it's more about like general or communal areas if the development has any. Otherwise, the development just works as a torrent title.
Yeah.
And if the block meets the minimum requirement for torrents, then you can subdivide them for torrents title.
Yeah, which is a pretty good benefit.
It is great. Yeah.
And obviously, a lot of people don't know this too, and I know you've been working on a beautiful terrace development with ocean views in Gerringong and with the basement.
With
Do you want to just talk a little bit about that? Because there's probably people out there who don't, And look, basements, obviously, you can't really do a basement in a lower spec'd up area, but an area where you can really get that resale value, and where we're talking ocean views, or in a really, top suburb, or an area where you can get the resale. Like, tell us a little bit about basements, like for terraces
Well,
under CDC.
you can do basement for duplexes, you can do basement for terraces, but specifically in this one in Gerringong is a huge benefit because we are in an amazing location. So it is a bit of a wasted of view to have a double garage facing the water.
Yeah.
So it's better to actually provide a basement that most likely might be able to fit 2 or 3 or 4 cars in a location like Gerringong in the south coast. The investor will be able to get them return, but at the same time, we were able to have a big master bedroom overlooking the ocean on the ground floor. And also have, in this particular scenario, we did reverse living, which we provided all the living areas in the first floor, which allowed us for unlimited ocean views of Gerringong.
Which is pretty cool because, again, CDC,
Yes.
no neighbour objections, fully compliant, no going backward and forward with council, having to deal with heaps of, objections from neighbours or community members. It's that's a huge advantage, isn't it?
It is amazing, yes. That one also was wider than the minimum, so we were able to give more. So they actually feel like houses.
Yeah.
They are full-on houses. And in most of the actual development, they are detached. So it doesn't feel like they are cramped.
Yeah.
And we have stepped them because they are in a quite steep block, in a corner block. And we have able to have them stepping and following the actual slope of the road where there is unlimited views from each of them. So it is, there is a lot of ways and different areas to explore in the terrace world. It is not just a long, narrow house.
Yeah.
Definitely is way more than that.
Brilliant. And look, let's just have a quick chat around the Taraji terraces that you were talking about. So we're talking 6 terraces. Originally, I believe you'd been designing a duplex on just a corner block.
Yeah.
Was it?
Detached duplex, yeah.
Yeah. So just tell us a little bit about that one. I know it's one that you're quite passionate about. Tell us a little bit about that as a bit of a case study. Like what happened there? You're doing a duplex and they had the opportunity to score another block. Tell us about it.
Yes. Originally, the developer was proposing a duplex near a block where they grew up in a few meters from the beach in the south coast. And while we were developing it, they say, hey, we have the opportunity of buying the next door, making it wasn't the corner, it was the next from the corner, and they were able to get the corner one. So by doing that, we make them deep enough, but they were also now in a corner. So we took advantage that for where the original block was the depth, now we have it as wide on the other corner.
Yep.
And it was a bit of a challenge because we needed to make the driveways work.
Yep.
And because it was a corner and we had some trees that we needed to keep, we needed to make sure before we went to FAD that we were able to fit 6. The client, his numbers were making up for 5.
Yep.
But we wanted to push it as far as we could, fit 6. So we went to council. We applied for a Section 138. We got them approved. And, we were able to fit really interesting 6 terraces.
Yeah.
In Terraces.
And they're quite amazing too, the facades. That it's not like for me, I think they'll be some of the nicest, most attractive terraces in New South Wales, I believe.
I think the same. They are out of the box. I think that I love that a lot of the architecture at the moment in New South Wales is going white, timber, not everything, but a lot of it, which we also love. But this one went a bit moody. This one is black on black with some timber ceilings, and it is unbelievable because it's also close to the beach. So it also gives that feeling of moody but also coastal at the same time. We have raked ceilings, a lot of glass also. They are unbelievable.
And what
You will
about
have
floor
to watch
space?
for it.
FSR or GFA, floor space ratio. What sort of floor space do we get on those sites?
It does. Oh, let me tell.
60%?
60% of the site. But there is one important thing to note in there that is a big constraint, I find, that is the landscape.
Yes.
Okay, so most of the times in other developments, our biggest constraint is the FSR.
Yes.
What I find in the terraces that my big constraint as a designer is the setbacks that we already discussed, but the landscape. Why? Because in terraces, the landscape must meet the minimum requirement per block,
Yes.
per the resulting block after subdivision.
Yeah.
And that makes it a bit trickier because even though you have a bit more FSR that you can play with, the landscape sometimes make us having to reduce the ground floor footprint slightly.
So essentially, just because you've got 60%, you may not necessarily be able to use it all.
No.
Like especially if you've got a larger than standard front setback, I'm guessing.
Yes. Especially because the minimum size of the landscape that is allowed to be included as a landscape computation in CDC is 1.5. So we must be able to have wider landscape areas to be able to meet the requirement.
Yeah.
There is also another requirement in terraces that is not in the other type of developments, and is that the New South Wales government introduced the livable guidelines into these terraces. So a percentage of each of the terraces must comply with the silver guidelines of the livable housing.
Yeah.
So that is also future-proofing the users that if something happens to them or they are downsizing or they are just visualizing themselves in those dwellings for long term, they will be able to modify small elements, or they are already friendlier with somebody that has certain physical disabilities or reductions.
Yeah, very good. All right. Well, look, I think we've got probably room for another 2 or 3 episodes around terraces because there's just so much to learn.
Definitely.
In that space. But just to wrap us up, is there any last just parting thoughts that you want to share, just that you think might give a little bit of wisdom or advice to developers and investors out there wanting to partake in a terrace development? Is there anything you can just leave us with?
I think that it is awesome to be able to have more than 2 on a block in a time frame that we are able to get them approved. So it is a multi-dwelling development in a CDC time.
Yeah.
So we need to take advantage of it because that reduces the stress, that has more economical benefits. It is just a beautiful world for an investor.
Yeah.
And I think that at the moment, from what I can see around and for the conversations that I have with other companies and other designers, we are not taking advantage enough of this amazing tool that we have been given a couple of years ago.
Brilliant. Well, it's been good to have you on again. I'm sure we'll get you back and we'll be talking all things terraces.
Definitely.
And for all of our listeners, thanks for tuning in. Yeah, if you've got a lot out of this episode, make sure you jump onto the show notes and you'll see all the different links to duplex building design. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you share this podcast if you've got something out of it. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.